PragerU, a for-profit content machine, it was quite literally created by Dennis Prager.
If we don't want our history erased, we should teach our children how the United States started as a free republic.
Who are working to destroy public education and ban books, prevent public schools from teaching lessons.
To expect PragerU to acquire a credentialing that does not exist while not expecting it from any other group.
Literally a puppet of the Trump administration and key agent in speedrunning this country.
And I think that's the real problem, is that there's a group of people who claim to be for diversity and inclusion, but in fact they want to exclude anyone who has views that are different than their own.
Here we go again. Jill Simonian from PragerU Kids here, and I have a very special guest with me that I am so excited for you to meet, because we are going to address something very exciting, shall we say, that happened on January 12th at the Kern County School Board meeting, the Board of Education for one of the Central Valley school districts in California. PragerU Kids was invited to present some of our materials for consideration for supplemental use in the Kern County schools. And I got to tell you, the board was very respectfully inquisitive, but in fact, there were a handful of hecklers. I want to introduce you to Dr. Matthew Garrett. You are our resident education scholar, right?
Yeah, a professor on hand is needed, yes.
Professor on hand, and you are in fact a teacher.
Yeah, my background is I have an undergraduate degree in education. I taught secondary education, then I became a professor, taught other people to become teachers. So yeah, I have a lot of background in education.
Okay, very good. And the reason why you're joining me here today is so that we can talk about the eruptive critiques, shall we say, that happened at this Kern County Board of Education meeting. There were so many misconceptions. There were so many misinformed individuals that I certainly hope will eventually go to PragerU.com to really find out what we really do here in terms of our educational content for kindergarten through 12th graders. And we want to address these considerations in real time with video from the school board meeting. And you are, as you mentioned, our resident history professor. And Matt is also a part of what's become a very exceptionally extensive education team here at PragerU Kids. I think we should jump in to the meeting.
Let's do it.
Should we? Okay, let's jump in. I'd like to take a look right now at the very first speaker who showed up to contest our consideration for PragerU Kids to be included at the Kern County Board of Education meeting.
Its primary mission: promote American values through the creative use of digital media, advancing specific values. The mission focuses on advancing values described as pro-American. That sounds great. But what are those values? Pro-capitalism and pro-family. That really sounds great too, while upholding Judeo-Christian principles. And so this is really, again, like the Ten Commandments, where, again, wedging in Christianity into the public school system, which we know is not something that the First Amendment subscribes to.
So she talks about the First Amendment there. Now, listen, I am not a constitutional scholar. I've been at PragerU Kids since the very beginning. I was one of the first two people that began this journey of creating PragerU Kids, and I've learned a lot while being here, creating the content that we do. And the one thing that I do know is that the First Amendment historically does not mean freedom from religion, but it means freedom to recognize religion as you see fit. Am I completely mistaken? I want you to clarify this as the certified educator.
You're right on. So one of the speakers also, I think, makes a direct reference to Thomas Jefferson's wall of separation quote from the Danbury letter he writes in 1802, which is often turned to as an excuse to say religion can't enter the public sphere at all. But that's not at all what Thomas Jefferson was really writing about. He was writing to a congregation that was concerned that a state religion in Connecticut, Congregationalism, was going to somehow impose on their faith. And he said, don't worry, your faith won't be imposed on. It was not about taking religion out or culture or morality out of the state. That was never the plan. In fact, the founders long expected morality, religious morality, to be part of the American experience. They were placing great trust in the hands of ordinary Americans to run the government. And so from Washington to Adams and others talked openly about the need to have a religious moral code that was guiding Americans who were trusted with this great power in the Republic. So no, you can't have a state religion anymore, but you can have moral values, and those should play a role in the policies we pursue.
Well, it's interesting because lately I have heard more and more a lot of people screaming separation of church and state, separation of church and state. And they're the same people that say we don't want our history erased. And I look at that as a mother saying, if we don't want our history erased, perhaps we should teach our children how the United States started as a free republic based on a moral people. You can't have a free republic without the foundation of morality. Am I crazy?
No, yeah, you can't even understand the origins of the United States or much of the history without a real understanding of the religious values that those people had. Whether you're looking at the Puritans who came over for religious freedoms and their beliefs in predestination and concerns that led to this Puritan work ethic that drove America to become the most productive engine in the world, or if you're talking about the Declaration of Independence and how it's grounded in these individual rights given by God that are inalienable, right? Inalienable because they're from God. And that's the foundation for modern civil rights. So if you have a civil rights lawsuit on freedom of religion or on identity of some sort, that's all grounded in those beliefs that came out of that. Or most importantly, I think a great example is slavery. We always ask students in my classroom, I'd say, why is slavery wrong? And they all know it's wrong, but why is it wrong? And they don't know the answer because they've been disconnected from the roots. And the roots were that the abolitionist movement said slavery is morally wrong because God says it's wrong.
It's in the Bible.
It's everyone is treated equal. Yes. And that's why it's wrong. And they've lost that because they've attempted to pull religion out of the classroom is really causing us to not understand the history as well as we should.
I want to go to the next clip.
My name is Emiliano Tristan. I received my education within the Kern County. I'm a proud parent within the Bakersfield City School District, and I strongly disagree with the implementation of all and any PragerU PragerU material within the classroom. I believe that PragerU is a company that spreads misinformation and right-wing propaganda. They continuously disregard scientific data about multiple subjects like the everything basically, climate change and just values in general, just misleading information, and yeah, that's about it.
That's about it.
That's about it.
Okay, so listen, I'm not going to sit here and poke fun at anyone. It is difficult to get up and speak in a public forum, and I always say, I may not agree with what you have to say, but I'll always defend your ability to say it. And in this particular case, I will also say I applaud you for having the courage to stand up. However, all that said, if you are going to make claims, generally speaking, about any topic, and you don't have specific examples to point to, are your claims even credible?
Yeah, I don't think so. There's no evidence there except long pauses.
There's a lot of long pauses. There's a lot of trepidation. I feel like he, God bless him for standing up. But listen, I've been on the other side of these school board meetings 5 years ago when I was one of the parents going to my local school board, trying to get the schools open from the lockdowns, trying to ring the alarms about the dangers and destruction of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So I've been on the other end. However, what happens here, and I'm just going to bet that this individual has never once gone to our website, never once watched a video in its entirety. I'm going to guess that this is a classic case of mistaken groupthink. And it's really disappointing. And for me, it really drives home how desperately our materials and philosophy are needed in public schools to teach children that you are responsible for the things you know and don't know. And it is up to you, and it's your responsibility to become educated about different topics, even if you might not agree with them at first glance. Matt, I also want to address how the general notion that we are not educators continues to come up in a lot of the critiques that we're seeing more and more. They're not accredited. They're not educators. We don't think they should be included in anything within our schools, when the actuality is that at PragerU Kids, we have been going to conferences. We have been doing professional teacher development. We have credentialed educators in-house. Can you speak to some of those behind-the-scenes things that perhaps maybe people really aren't informed about that they should know about?
Yeah, I think the root of his concern is that he believes there's bias. And I think that, of course, everyone has bias, and we're quite open and transparent about our biases, that we are pro-family, pro-capitalism, pro-America. And so certainly, yes, those biases exist, but they're not overtly taught in some sort of ideological lens that's pushing an agenda. Instead, what we have are trained professional experts. We have teachers, subject matter experts, historians. We have a whole team of people who are able to scour through documents, who are proofreading, who are checking. And then not only is there a whole lot of internal evaluation and assessment of the content, but we're exporting also to outside groups so that outside boards are reviewing, and curriculum officers in different school districts and states. And so there's a whole lot of review process going on here that maybe doesn't even apply in other programs. You can take a look, for example, the 1619 project that rolled out a few years ago.
Yep, I remember that one.
I remember Sean Willens at Princeton, well known as a left-wing professor whose views I don't agree with on a lot of issues, but he's a credible, solid professor. And he looked at it and said, this is not good. And so you're getting that from across the spectrum, and that's who's producing things, whether that's the New York Times in 1619 or Scholastic or other organizations. They're able to produce all sorts of things, and no one raises any alarm when they do. But when PragerU does it, there's concern, despite the fact that PragerU actually has credentialed teachers, historians, and scholars producing this work.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Let's take a look at the next clip.
So again, this is addressing the PragerU partnership. Okay. First of all, I can't believe I have to say this, but schools should only be partnering with reputable educational organizations. Not only is PragerU a for-profit content machine, it was quite literally created by Dennis Prager, a talk show host, not an educator, not an expert in educational topics, but literally a puppet of the Trump administration and key agent in speed-running this country into an authoritarian fascist regime. PragerU is created and developed by influencers, not educators. So instead of partnering with an influencer company that makes $60 million a year, we partner with actual universities with credible credentials and unbiased educational materials. Since its inception in 2009, PragerU still hasn't tracked its effects on student achievement. Why? Because they don't actually care about helping your students. An entity who genuinely cares about your kids will collect data to improve upon its practices, but PragerU doesn't do this because it only cares about profiting and convincing people like yourselves that they're legit.
So before I get your reactions to this, Matt, I want to quickly address the claims about Dennis Prager. He's a talk show host. Dennis Prager's a best-selling author. Multi-times best-selling author, one of the greatest thinkers of our time. Dennis Prager, she says he's a Trump puppet. Dennis Prager's been around a lot longer than Trump has been in politics. Your reaction?
Yeah, so I think also it's noteworthy that a lot of Dennis's contributions in organizing PragerU years ago now, a decade and a half ago, that often those videos were focused on exposing fascism and dismantling fascism and fighting fascism. So he's as anti-fascist as you're going to find. But I think the bigger issue here is that clearly the speaker has been informed that Dennis Prager doesn't share her views. And she believes that makes him ineligible to participate in the political sphere. And I think that's the real problem, is that there's a group of people who claim to be for diversity and inclusion, but in fact, they want to exclude anyone who has views that are different than their own. And that's the opposite of what we ought to be doing. We ought to be saying, look, the academy and the school yard needs to be open to different viewpoints. And I think also she's probably building off of this false notion of a blank slate, that the schools are a place where there's no viewpoint already. And so PragerU's introducing a viewpoint, and that's not okay. But that's not the case. We do not have a blank slate. We've had decades of indoctrination from one political side of the spectrum overrunning the schools. It became very obvious to parents during the pandemic, and we got the Zoom window into the classroom. And so PragerU provides an opportunity for a different point of view. And I'll also say the PragerU Kids content that's being paired with these schools is not overtly ideological at all. It's much more content-based. It's tied to cores, core standards. It plugs right into what's already assigned to be taught. So it's not at all driving some other narrative. It's simply supporting the existing structure, the existing curriculum that happens in the schools.
Absolutely true. And we're also introducing some of the most needed subject matters that kids aren't learning. According to our NAEP test scores the last few years, we have materials that teach civics. Children are not learning civics. I think it was a few years ago, the results were that 13% of 8th graders were actually proficient in knowing how our system of government works. And that's something that all kids in schools need to be learning. And our schools are also not teaching financial literacy. Here in California, right now, there is an initiative from California leadership, who I really don't necessarily agree with, but there is an initiative to include financial literacy instruction in our schools so that kids can graduate high school having a sense of how to be personally responsible fiscally.
Yeah, we routinely see surveys that say that people believe schools should be teaching basic things like how to do your taxes and how to balance your budget. Well, if you go to PragerU's website, you can find videos on how
all there.
So there's this financial literacy, which is clearly not ideological. It's simply providing the skills they need so they can be successful. We want these students to hit these points of success and progress, whether that's in history, civics, financial literacy, arts. We have shows on arts and music. So there's a variety of ways that we can help students to reach their potential and be engaged with dynamic, entertaining educational material that they might not be able to find in the regular curriculum at their school.
It's really fascinating the way we're often falsely accused of being authoritarian or fascist, when in fact we really do believe in teaching all children how to abide by the golden rule. And with that, I want to send it to this next clip.
Americans United Chair Rachel Laser said Prager was part of a, quote, a shadow network of Christian nationalists and their political allies who are working to destroy public education and church-state separation. They're trying to ban books, prevent public schools from teaching lessons about race, sexual orientation, gender identity, and even menstruation, and encouraging teachers to pray with public school students while displaying the Ten Commandments and In God We Trust in classrooms.
Again, a lot to unpack. I'm going to personally start with his accusation of displaying the Ten Commandments in schools. I understand why some people might get very triggered by that, but when we talk about not wanting to erase history, our school system literally started with the Ten Commandments being posted in our schools. The Bible was our education system's very first textbook. I know that many things have changed since then, but when we're talking about inclusion, as we so often do, particularly here in California schools, I myself have had a very difficult time understanding why people who happen to enjoy the tenets of the Ten Commandments are not able to be included. Your thoughts about some of his other comments?
Yeah. So again, there's the issue of the not being credentialed, which I think we need to kind of unpack that a little bit. That there's two types of credentialing. There's this idea that an institution is credentialed, like a university or a college or a high school or an elementary school, a school board, and they give out degrees and certificates. They need to be credentialed. But an institution that produces content like McGraw-Hill or PBS, they're not credentialed. They're just an institution that produces content. And so there's no expectation that they be credentialed. And it's really a double standard to expect PragerU to acquire a credentialing that does not exist while not expecting it from any other group. That's really back to the idea of suppressing views you don't like.
One thing I do want to talk about before we go is how we are partnered now with 12 different state education departments, which is so exciting because let me tell you, 5 years ago, that was merely a teeny tiny little glimmer of hope that we kept as a beacon, so to speak, to drive us forward with the type of content we wanted to create. But it's very exciting, and each state partnership is very different. I want to clarify, and I want you to clarify, that these state partnerships are not mandatory. They don't require teachers to include our curriculum. All of our videos are absolutely free. Our worksheets are free. Our lesson plans are free. Everything is on the website, PragerUKids.com, for full transparency for any kind of a parent or teacher or administrator to view in its entirety. There's no secrets. Everything is out there. And I want to get your thoughts for anyone who is feeling nervous or alarmed that, oh, I heard my school or my state is involving PragerU.
Yeah, these partnerships, what they really consist of is simply aligning our content to their standards. So a state will say to us, we want to make sure that this is covered and that is covered and this issue and that issue. And we'll say, great, let us help you by directing you to where you can find that material on our website. And that can take different forms. We have a partnership with Alaska where we actually built them their own web page, and it's perfectly correlated to all of the standards they're already teaching. In other states, we have professional development partnerships. We have courses that are being taught. And we're even starting a new partnership now with the Department of Education, and also a partnership with some universities that are starting to build. We have a university in Florida that's now starting to teach a course built on our content. So we're really just looking to provide content for instructors, for credentialed institutions who would like to teach content, so they know that there's material out there they can use and rely on and not be isolated and alone.
And lastly, the quote, "They're not educators, they're influencers." It drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. First of all, I am not a credentialed teacher.
Well, think how I feel.
Yes, you are an educator.
Yeah,
when it comes to the
there's a
final
team.
product.
There's a whole team,
Yeah.
and everything is closely monitored, closely checked, double checked, fact checked, goes through multiple processes. And there are credentialed folks on staff. We have still several other credentialed teachers and historians, fact checkers, and a whole lot of folks that are making sure the content is rigorous and accurate and quality content for our students.
We both are parents, and parents truly are the primary and most important educators of our children. So don't let anyone tell you that you are not an educator, parents, because we are. And we've been brainwashed and coerced for so long to think that we are not equipped to give our children the knowledge that they need to want to learn, to have a lifelong love of learning, and to really take responsibility for themselves to live a full, happy, positive life in knowing that, we live in the most blessed country in the world. America's not perfect, but it is the most blessed country in the world, and we should take ownership of teaching our children that as parents and as teachers. Any final thoughts?
We need to celebrate those virtues. I mean, America is great, and there's a reason it's great, and we want our students to understand that so they can preserve and protect and perpetuate it.
Well, now you know, Dr. Matthew Garrett, thank you for being here, sharing your thought. We got to get back to work, yes?
Yes.
Yes, and we hope that this conversation helped you in learning the truth about what we do here at PragerU Kids and what we believe in. And by the way, if you want to get a little bit more information about what you see behind me, this is our book fair in a box, which was actually the subject of the meeting for the Kern County Board of Education. You can find out much more about it at PragerUKids.com, and you can subscribe for free to get all of our videos and resources in your inbox every single week. I'm excited for this year, aren't you?
It's going to be great.
It's going to be great. All right. Thank you. See you next time.